Today is go through and discuss the employee survey. I did a survey along with the CIDC and the chamber to get a feel for the employees and how they feel going through COVID-19. And so I will discuss the results and review some of the most important points with you. And then I will cover some tips on how to ensure we're creating a safe and productive work environment now and as we go through the pandemic. And then we'll go through some ways that we can ensure that we're moving forward in the right way. And then I plan to have a Q&A at the very end. There will be times throughout the presentation that I will stop and ask if there's any questions. So feel free to interject any questions you have at that time. And also, you can raise your hand using the option in the participants window. You may not see that now because I am sharing my screen with you, but be sure to indicate that you have a question while we go through the training, and I'll be sure to get to those as we go through. So for me, I'm Andrea Corpening, and some of you know my background, but some of you don't, so I wanted to go through that very quickly. I am a former bank manager. I was a bank director as well. And then for almost 7 years, I was a corporate bank trainer. So it was my job to teach people how to do their job and how to learn how to make the company more successful. In fact, in 2008, when we went through the last recession, I was a banker, and I had to teach and work with employees to help them embrace the changes, help them through bank closures and locations that were having to be closed. And then we modified a lot of the job roles at that time. And so I have a lot of experience helping employees through change, which we're in a really big change right now. I also was a Department of Labor workshop instructor, and I am certified by the Association for Talent Development to help businesses with increasing their employee programs and employee performance. So we're here today because of COVID-19. We are in the middle of a pandemic, and it's important that I know a lot of us have been focusing on, well, how do we get the businesses open? We want to get back to work. And now I feel is a critical time for us to step back and consider the changes that the employees are facing and even position our companies and organizations at a better place. And so because we are in the middle of change, we have to consider that there's change on all different levels. So the entire organization may be in a budget crunch. You might be low on cash from the entire organization standpoint. You may have had to lay off employees, but it also filters down to the individuals. Well, how are the individuals being affected? Can the individuals even go to work at this point? What emotional or physical challenges are the individuals having at that lower level? And then we have to consider the actual jobs. Many of us have not used virtual training and virtual systems. And so many of you have had to learn that. And there is a certain amount of stress that goes into change or learning a new job. And then there's also an effect on the different departments. So we have to consider right now, are we positioning our companies and our organizations to be successful? And it starts with being sure the people are ready, being able to adjust to this new process, this new normal that we're in the middle of. So we have to consider all the different levels of the organization. So here, I did the employee survey, of course, and I just wanted to take a moment to talk about why employee surveys are important. Well, in order for us to find out how the individual is doing at that lowest level, sometimes we have to do an employee survey. We also might have to do an employee survey at the department level or even across the entire organization. But employee surveys are so important because it gives employees a voice. And guess what? Not all employees are going to be 100% honest with you. They might be an honest person, but a lot of times we find not all employees are direct. They're not going to just tell you their thoughts and their ideas. Sometimes employees need to be given the opportunity to express their ideas and how they're feeling, because sometimes they won't be honest with you because they might feel like they're going to hurt your feelings. They might feel like they might get laid off. There's different things that go into that. And I find that millennials and Generation Z, pretty much anybody born after 1980 has always had a voice. They've always had the internet. They've always had the opportunity to create a video and go viral. So they have something to say. And we have to be sure that in our organizations, we're giving people that opportunity to share what they have to say and how they feel, because they're not always going to tell us that openly. And even loyal employees will sometimes not say their ideas and their thoughts unless they're given that opportunity. So employee surveys are a great way to do that. Also, if you do an employee survey, it's important that they are anonymous, again, so that they can be honest and open with their ideas and their thoughts. So if you can't have that direct interaction with them or ask them their thoughts, how are you feeling? How do you think we're going to come through this pandemic, and what can we do to make this easier for you or to help you in the process of learning this new normal? A survey is going to be a great way to do that. But if you do a survey, it does require action. So we have to do something with those results. So let's go through the results. I did only identify a couple of the most important results at this point. There are some things that will help us as we get back to business, as we get back to work, and then even after things settle, there's still a lot of great data that we did get from this survey. But for today, I'm only going to focus on the ones that we need to address now and over the next couple of weeks. So the survey ran for 1 week, and we had several people from New Mexico that provided responses. We also had individuals from across the US as well. But when it comes to the New Mexico respondents, majority of them were female. So women, I find sometimes are maybe not as direct. And so you kind of have to give them the opportunity to open up sometimes, not all women, but majority of them took advantage of the opportunity to express how they felt regarding COVID-19. 11% were male, and then there were 2 people that chose not to tell their gender. When it comes to the employment status, 35% of them were considered essential, or they're still working. And so that means they're working outside of their home. So they work at a grocery store, they work for UPS, or they're delivering groceries, or they're delivering mail. It could be a cable, or someone at Plateau making sure that we have internet. So there's different aspects of essential, but it's pretty much anyone that's working outside of their home and interacting with customers or employees. Working from home, we had about 27% of the people, so that means they are still employed and they're working in their home. 20% were furloughed or fired as a result of COVID-19. And then 18% kind of grouped everybody else into the other column because they were either self-employed or they were unemployed before the actual survey. So let's go through the first question. Question number 1, hypothetically, if the restrictions were lifted next week and you were asked to work face-to-face with people, customers and coworkers, how would you feel? And the results are 74% of the people that were currently working from home said that they would be nervous or afraid. 15% said, I'm working from home and I'll be ready to go back to work. I like to think those are probably a lot of the extroverted people that just love people. 5% said that they would be indifferent, and a few people actually said that they would consider quitting or talking to their employer because, again, they probably are nervous or afraid, or they have an underlying illness that makes them vulnerable to COVID-19. And the question does imply that the COVID-19 cases are very high or uncertain, which is where we are now. So I thought that was quite interesting because 74% of people said that they would be very nervous or afraid to leave their home and go back into a normal working environment. Moving on to the next question, and I want to launch the next poll, and let me tell you what the question is. Question number 2 is, what is your greatest source of anxiety or concern regarding working now? So this is, right now, I would like for Kit to launch the poll so that I can hear from you what your greatest source of anxiety or concern is, so that we can be sure to hear from you. And I also want to hear what you think employees said in this particular survey.
All right, Miss Andrea, I am having trouble getting to the second one.
Okay, click on the drop down arrow.
The drop down arrow. Inside the polls, right?
Yes.
Okay, the drop down, it says 1, but it's not showing me how to get to stop sharing results. There we go, sorry. Better, thank you, sorry.
Oh, no problem, thank you. Okay, so if you'll take a moment and complete the 2 questions so I can gauge from you your thoughts. And this is anonymous. And we'll take about another minute. And while you all are completing that, I will answer Gail's question. Gail asked if the respondents in the survey were predominantly military. I did not break down the demographics into the industry of the people. I could tell from some of the answers that some of them were military, but I would say majority of the ones that completed the survey were not military. So there had to be a very small percentage. There were a couple of people that mentioned military or installation, but I would assume that it would be probably about 5% just based upon looking at the results. Okay, Kit, if you'll go ahead and share the results from the survey. Okay, so based upon those that are joining us, you mentioned that your number one greatest source of concern or anxiety now, 71% of you all answered your health or your family's health. And some of you did express your business financial challenges, personal challenges regarding finances, as well as getting businesses back to running or operation. When it comes to the question number 2, what do you think employees rated as their greatest source of concern or anxiety regarding working? Majority of you said their health or their family's health, which is correct. Majority of the people mentioned their own health or their family's health. There were some comments in the survey that said just the fear of coming home and giving it to their family. That was a lot that came through in the comments. Okay, so let's take a look at how the results came out for this question. 43% said right now their greatest source of anxiety or concern is their own health or their family's health, followed by 22% saying financial challenges, so paying their bills or worried about even possibly their business payroll. And then 15% said interacting with people, finding a job, and then you'll notice 6% said childcare concerns. Now, it broke down to those that are essential, so they are waking up, getting dressed, going outside of their home. Most of them were more likely to select their health or their family's health, and that came out to about 47% when you narrow down the essential workers and their greatest concern. It broke down to about 47% were most likely to select health or their family's health. In the national report, essential workers outside of Clovis or outside of New Mexico actually rated health about 61%. And so it was interesting seeing those outside of New Mexico and those that are in high areas where they're experiencing a lot of illness related to COVID-19, they were more likely to say health and their family's health as well. Furloughed or laid off workers were most likely to select financial challenges, that being their greatest source of anxiety. So if we can open it up for any questions so far. If you have a question. Okay, doesn't look like we have any questions, so we'll move on. Question number 3 says, the CDC recommends using mask and social distancing for the foreseeable future. How could these recommendations affect your ability to perform your job? 41% of respondents said that there would be no impact to the ability to do their job. 38% said it would be difficult to do my job. 13% said, I don't want to work if I have to be around people. So we would have some people that would not be able to perform their job because they wouldn't be able to physically or emotionally. They don't want to do their current job if they had to be around people at this point. 8% mentioned it would be impossible for them to do their job if they had to use masks and maintain social distancing. So what this tells me is we have employees that if we get back to work and we have to start using masks and social distancing, and that's the expectation for them to maintain their own health or the health of others, we're going to have to revamp our current roles. Because if it would limit our ability to do the job at that either individual level or the job level. So now we might have to adjust someone's role. Maybe they're a cashier, maybe they're a cashier, or they work at the grocery store, whatever their role is, business as usual would not be able to happen. So every business would have to look at how this impacts each of their roles and the impact on the individual as well. So that is important for us to consider now. So right now, if we were to get all of our businesses at least opening at, let's say even 50%, are we ready to implement some of these guidelines that we are being told we should be doing, especially now because things are still uncertain. We don't really know how many people have been affected. And so right now, we have to consider the impact of this on our business. Question number 4. As a result of this pandemic, what characteristics do you value most in a boss or supervisor? I think I added the chat. I probably did not. Okay, this is what I want to do. So in the chat box, I'm going to ask for you to write what you think employees said they valued most from their boss, or what they need most right now. So take a moment, and in the chat box, I want you to write what you think they said. So I see honesty, I see compassion, communication, another communication. So you guys are right on with what employees are saying that they need. And so I find a lot of times we say, well, I'm talking to them, I ask them how they're feeling, I ask them, how their family is, and that is communication as far as checking in on them, but it's not the type of communication at the highest level that employees are looking for. A lot of them are looking for just the honesty. They want to know, how is the company doing? Do you foresee having to make more layoffs? These are the type of comments that they left, that they just want to know. They want to be involved in it, and not necessarily involved in it, but they want to know what's going on. And so this was an open box. So we asked for them to write what characteristics they felt were most important. And they wrote communication, they wrote compassion, and understanding. And those were the top 3 that came across through this survey. Men and women both identified communication as one of the most important characteristics. So again, sometimes we think we're talking and we're communicating, but there's additional levels of that communication that sometimes doesn't come across. Another aspect of communication that I see is that it doesn't filter throughout the entire organization. So a company's leadership might say, this is what we're doing. We're going to modify, how we're doing this particular job. But sometimes managers of individual departments struggle in communicating that information further down. So communication could mean various things for organizations. Women were most likely to mention compassion. So there were several comments in there where people felt like they weren't heard. And I'll read one to you right now. I almost quit my job because I was scared to continue going to work and interacting with 100+ people per day. And I felt embarrassed and belittled when voicing my concerns. I'm glad they eventually let me work remotely, but I am definitely going to research and get a better grasp on the work environment and expectations at my next job. So that was a comment that was left. And so sometimes we don't know how to show that compassion. And a lot of the managers and supervisors are under a lot of stress themselves. So it's hard to turn it off personally and turn it on to their employees. But even something as simple as, having our phone and I'm working, I'm on my computer, I'm trying to figure out payroll, and now an employee is here trying to talk to me, that communicates a message as well. So communication, when it's coming across as a need that people have, it could be physically, it could be understanding what the goal of the organization is, how the organization is doing. So again, there's different reasons why employees rated that, but communication, compassion, and understanding came across as most important. So, question number 5, what measures can employers take to create a safe and normal work environment post-COVID-19. So when it comes to some of the comments that were left, and again, this was an open field, so 27 people left a comment related to encouraging their employer to follow expert guidelines. So that means CDC guidelines, maybe using social distancing in the federal government or the state government. A lot of them expressed that in their work environment, it's maybe hard to maintain social distancing, so they weren't. And so for some employees, if their health is their main concern, they're now uncomfortable because they're not able to work with others maintaining those guidelines, and then nobody was holding them accountable to it as well. So that came across as something that many of the employees were concerned about. 22 of them noted just encouraging employers to allow employees to work from home or taking measures to limit exposure. So if a business is open, be ensured that, again, from the top down of the organization, that they were, employers are limiting exposure of those employees to a lot of customers or anyone else that they're interacting with. 15 of them urged employers to be more supportive and understanding of employees. And again, that covers a lot. And so we don't have enough time to get into that. But at any level of the organization, that disconnect could be happening, as well as some people not knowing how to understand what's going on because they have enough stress on themselves. But employees did express that as a concern. 11 cited the importance of having PPE, so having gloves and having masks for employees. 10 focused on allowing and supporting telework. I know not all jobs can be conducted from home, but for some of them, employees are just wanting to at least have that conversation and seeing what can still be done from telework. And then last, just the importance of better communication from employers. I see a couple of comments, so I'm gonna take a moment here and check the comment box. So I have a question from Sandra about the demographics of the respondents. To be honest, I did not add demographics because I wanted people to feel safe, like that they could take it anonymously. In the next survey, probably would add some demographic information, but for the questions, I did at least add a section for if their concern was about children. And so if that was someone's primary concern, then they would have the opportunity to select that particular option if that was their most important. And there was also another section where I did ask specifics about children as well, and that is regarding their work schedule. And so there is not specific demographic information other than knowing who is essential and who is working from home. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions at this time. And if not, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask me a question. Someone have a question? Okay, so we'll continue to work through. So for this slide here, it says how employers can create a safe and productive work environment. And so I wanted to look at how people in New Mexico rated and provided as far as the number of responses for these topics, and then comparing it to what the national results are. And so New Mexicans were most likely to say and encourage employers to adhere to expert guidelines. So the survey showed that there's not a consistency related to following the CDC or the state guidelines. So employees are maybe confused about how their company is going to either have those guidelines in place or either respect those guidelines. And so just something as simple as having the gloves, or allowing employees, if they feel the need to wear a mask, using social distancing, that came across most, just employers not having that consistency to those expert CDC, state, or federal guidelines. And then encouraging or having the option to stay home or limit exposure, whether it is a facility that they're working out of or working from home. So this is the order for New Mexicans. Ironically, when you look at the national results, others outside of New Mexico were most likely to say, well, let's limit exposure, or let me stay home. That kind of came across in the survey. And then having employers providing the PPE that employees feel that they need to do their job, and of course, adhering to the expert guidelines. So I do find that New Mexico, our numbers are quite lower than some of the other states that did provide feedback, which is a good thing because we want to keep our numbers low. And so we do want to be sure that it's not confusing to employees as far as the company's standpoint on adhering to the guidelines. Which guidelines are we going to enforce? Which are we going to modify? And giving employees that opportunity to have a say, because what I find as important to me might be different from someone else. So why is this all important? When it comes to how an employee does their job, I like to use Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so Maslow's hierarchy of needs, some of you may be familiar with it if you've taken a psychology class or you've taken manager supervisor training. But if you start at the very bottom of the pyramid, we all have basic needs. I like to call them survival needs. So I have to have food. So if I'm hungry, I can't function. My brain hurts and I can't think. If I don't have food in my stomach. We need air. We need to be healthy. So if our basic survival needs aren't met, we can't show up and do our job, at least not successfully. And so if an employee is hungry or they don't have money to pay for their basic needs, it's very hard to get them to do their job successfully. And then after that level, you move up to the safety and security level. Well, I have to have physical safety. I have to feel like someone's not going to come in here and rob me, or I need to have job stability, that I have to feel like you're not going to fire me the next day. And once you get past the survival needs, I'm working this job and I have at least enough money to cover my basic needs, and then I feel safe working here and I feel like you're looking out for my safety, that's the basic minimum for having an employee show up with minimum productivity. So the cashier at the gas station, if they don't feel safe, then we can't expect for their cash drawer to be imbalanced, which is ultimately costing the company money. If an employee has to deliver a pizza and they don't feel safe and they don't know how to handle the situation, they don't know what to say to maintain social distancing from a customer, whether the customer is maintaining social distancing or not, then that's where you get where I've heard someone had a pizza thrown at them from a pizza delivery person. So it's important that we look at how are we first taking care of the basic survival needs of the employees and then making them feel safe. But in the survey, a lot of employees reported, of course, their income has been reduced. And so now they're worried about financial challenges. And then some of them have expressed their health is their main concern. And if they don't feel physically safe, then we're not helping them to perform their job successfully. So we don't have time to get into the rest of the pyramid of the hierarchy of needs, but I did feel it was important for us to review this because right now with the pandemic, it is hard for us to keep people safe. But as the employer, we have to be sure we're creating that environment. And one way we do that is by asking employees, well, what will make you feel safe? What are we doing now that you think we could be doing better? Now that your job has been modified, what else do you need? What can I do to help you through this? And so those are some examples of things that we should be asking them, and even possibly having that survey where they can share openly and honestly. Okay, I will stop for questions. Okay. So I have some tips for how do we move forward. So number one, in order for us to get back to work or get back to manning in our operations, we first have to identify how we can give employees peace of mind. I know if you watch the news, whatever news channel you watch, at different levels, they're saying we're working on antibodies tests, we're working on having more testing available. I do feel that at some level, some people will not feel safe to work until there is a vaccine or they have been assessed as far as whether they have had and contracted COVID-19 or not. If that doesn't happen, we still have to give employees peace of mind. So if by chance the governor lifts some of the restrictions that we're under currently, we have to figure out how we can help them feel safe, even if they don't have a vaccine ready or the antibody testing. And because remember, each employee may have their own definition of what they define as giving them peace of mind. Some of them right now have that health concern. They told us in the survey, many of you told us right now in this training, that your health or making someone else sick by maybe being asymptomatic and taking the virus to someone else is your greatest concern. And if that's the case, we need to focus on helping individuals through that. But some employees, their concern is financial. So we have to be able to communicate that if the company is financially safe and at a place where we're okay, we have to be able to communicate that. And then if we're also hurting, we have to be open and honest and let them know. And in fact, I have even found that when employers are very transparent in how the company is doing, if you have employees that you have at least help them to feel safe with you, they will think about ways to help the company grow through this. And that's what we need to focus on now. And so, as I mentioned, some ways to do that is to do those surveys, to do some forums. If employees are at home or whether they're in an office, we need to start having these conversations or have them even more. How can I make you feel safe to do your job? What else could we be doing? What would you like to know is the question there. So what questions do you have that I haven't answered for you? And that could be on the stability of the company, on future planning for the company. So some employees want to know and they want to hear or they want to have that conversation. So we need to be sure we're giving them that opportunity to ask. And an important point is, earlier I mentioned that employees are used to having a voice, especially those that are millennials or anyone pretty much born after 1980. We have to consider that they are used to having a voice, and so they want to be heard. And so they want typically more collaborative work environments. A couple of weeks ago, the mayor had made a post on Facebook that, you know, your employer is working hard for you, and they may not say that. And we actually have to start saying that, because people want to join in, they want to contribute, they want to collaborate. And I have seen across the organizations I've worked with across the US that your employees usually have the next big idea. And so we have to get them involved in that. And so giving them that voice is important, and helping them to be involved in that process is key. Number two, we have to be proactive in helping employees adjust to the new normal. How your company comes through the situation with COVID-19 and the possible recession is based on how proactive you are now to help employees perform at a new and high level based upon where we are. And so some employees, their job structure is going to have to change. If they work hand in hand with customers, or maybe customers are now not coming to your location and they want things delivered. These are all things we have to consider how they're going to change as we continue to go through this situation. And the key is being proactive. The time to fix this is not when we're back in operation. It's now, brainstorming now. So we have to identify how their work is going to be impacted, and then help them through the change, because individually they might be struggling with the change. They might be mentally stressed. So we might have to start with mental health assistance. Or we might need to look at revamping how they interact with customers. And so one way you'll do that is through, let's say, role plays. If you're not helping employees figure out how to approach different situations, you have to start there. If you're not helping them adjust to it, you're leaving it to them. And sometimes their definition of what you might find as what they should be doing is a lot different. And so something as simple as doing role plays and saying, you know, hey, if you have a customer that has on a mask, how are you going to adjust to that? How are you going to handle that? If you have a customer that wants you to do something that we haven't talked about, well, what are you going to do? And so being able to brainstorm what we need to do now, and then how to handle different scenarios, because every day something can change. And so we have to stay on top of it and be proactive. Some employees are able to adapt very easily to change. Their personality allows them to just adjust very quickly, and then others need time. So we have to be able to proactively help them where they are, and now, as well as we go through everything that's going on. We have to look for ways to be more efficient. I will tell you, there's a lot of companies that I've worked with that maybe they did things the same way for the past 10 years, and now they're being forced to look at things differently. So we have to find ways to be more efficient. Look at, how did we used to do things? How are we doing them now? And then how do we think they're going to be in the next couple of weeks? And so having some of these sessions, such as brainstorming, having conversations with them to think through what we can at least try to plan through, and have these discussions to find ways to be more efficient and save money even. How are we going to incorporate the different health guidelines? How are we going to create that environment where we are keeping employees and customers safe? And lastly, I mentioned mental health. There are a lot of employees that are going to need mental health assistance through this. They're going to need it now, and they're going to need it as we go through it. Someone wrote in the comments section that depression is real, and that is what they said. And so it's just such a critical time for everybody, and we just have to be sure we're giving employees what they need, because sometimes they don't they're maybe not telling you at the level that it really is. And so they might think that you might let them go, or that they might face repercussions for being honest. So we have to consider that, the job changes, and then any new job expectations that will come out of that or this. So I'm gonna check the comment section, see if we have any questions. Okay. And the last step or recommendation I have is about making sure communication is flowing from the top down. I talk to a lot of business owners and a lot of CEOs that say, you know, our main goal is the safety of our customers and our employees. And we have to be sure that message, for example, is flowing all the way through the organization, because there might be a manager or a supervisor that maybe doesn't have the same view, or they're not able to reinforce that same message. And so a lot of times employees that are having the most struggles are having the struggle in a certain department. So we have to be sure that employees are getting a consistent message. That is very important. So when it comes to employee performance, there's a lot of things that go into making an employee successful in their job. The systems and technology, maybe the computer systems, that's only one aspect of helping an employee to do their job. There's also the skills of the manager and them being able to coach and listen and help employees where they are, because each employee is at different levels. And the manager being able to give each employee what they need is an important aspect of employee performance. Placement, making sure you have the right employees in the right positions, is also important, which from the survey, some employees are not ready to either go back to work because of health reasons or their concern, anxiety. So placement of the employees is actually naturally kind of messed up right now. So we have to consider, are employees in the right positions, and are they ready and able to perform the job as it is, or even mentally or physically. As I mentioned, a lot of the jobs that we have now might have to be adjusted. So employees will need to learn how to interact with customers, or almost relearn as well how to interact with people on the other side of this. And so training is another aspect of being able to help employees and set them up for success. The last point I'll mention is organizational development. And so organizational development is pretty much employee programs, and being able to think strategically long-term about what resources employees need to do their job. And so there's a lot of things that go into helping employees to perform at a high level. And right now we are in the middle of something that has shaken up everything that we have known. And so it is important that every organization consider their people, how the roles have changed, how their leaders are working with the employees, and even how systems that we currently use or we've used in the past are going to have to change potentially as well. So it's kind of a very important point of where we are right now. And I know a lot of us are like, hey, well, we just need to get open. We need to get our money to pay people, but we also need to make sure we're setting up the business and the employees for success. So I want to share a quote with you, and it says, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence. It is to act with yesterday's logic. And that's from Peter Drucker. And so it's important that we take a moment to step back and say, Are the people ready? Have we given them everything we need to adjust to this, to come out successfully through a recession? And how are we going to make it a better process for employees or customers? So there's a lot of other aspects that we need to be considering as well. So that is the end of what I was going to cover. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and see what questions you all have for me.
Well, Andrea, I don't have well, I guess it is a question, but I'll do it in the form of a statement though too.
Okay.
You know, lots of times I see where, and you may have brought it up over the last days, or maybe it's something that I've read. I've been reading quite a bit, but where employees are concerned that they are like on the front line. You know, they're putting themselves at risk, but they don't see the management or the owners doing the same. So, you know, there's really not a question in that, but, you know, if you just have any feedback on that statement.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that came across a lot through the survey. In fact, I do have a quote that I'll share with you here, and then I'll give you some tips. So one of the quotes here is, "I see and feel firsthand the anxiety and stress because there are so many people crowding the store. We are not safe. Management spends most of their shifts in their offices. We don't have that luxury. We're scared. We can't afford to take unpaid leave, but we don't want to die. We need help." That is a comment from the survey. And so what I find is a lot of the leaders that are in the offices are actually doing things to cover payroll, or they're applying to loans to cover those things so that they can keep employees on board. Or in this example, they might be putting in an order to make sure that the people have food and things like that. So the leaders are working, but what I find is there's the gap between the communication. So when employees say that they need communication, they need you know, to understand what's going on in the organization, I would say it starts with the manager, the leader, the business owner saying, you know, hey, this is what I'm working on this week. I'm trying to make sure that, you know, we can get the funding to keep everyone on board. I'm sorry, but it does look like we are going to have to make some decisions in the future. There might be some layoffs that are coming. We are hurting financially. We are down 90% of our income. And that's, for example, what came through the business survey. We kind of have to be honest, and they want to know that. They don't want to feel like you're going to walk in and tell them that they're let go right now. They want to at least kind of foresee that a little bit, for example. And so there is a strong tone that employees don't know what's going on, and that's one of the things that's causing that disconnect. Mm-hmm. And then again, you might have a manager of a department that is not communicating, and now that employee has the perception of the entire company, where the CEO or the business owner is probably very open and transparent, but the employee's individual manager maybe is not trained on it. They don't know how to do it. They have their own personal struggles. And so again, it may not be filtering down from the top down. And so it is important that all of our leaders, every leader, everybody that manages people, or if you're a business owner, we have to be sure that we are telling them the information, or we leave it to their imagination to figure it out. And that does not help the organization.
Mm-hmm. You know, another thing that I really try to share with business owners too is when it comes to even the financial statements, to share that with their staff. There was and of course I can't remember the name of the book right now, but it's one of my professional development calls that I had, and they had went around and asked the employees, well, what do you think the bottom line, the net profit is for the company? And of course, it was a restaurant, and they were like, oh, 60% net profit.
Mm-hmm.
That is unheard of for a restaurant to have 60% net profit, but they didn't know. And so after the financials were shared, and there was a slim margin, less than 5%, then it was like, oh wow. So if I burn this steak, then I am going to have to make 6 more other steaks just to make up for that one that I burnt. And so just how the quality, the thought process, the ideas that they came up with change just because that information was shared too. So thanks for all that you do. You're right on.
Thank you. Yes, that is such a great example. I've had organizations too that I have worked with to help them build that communication in. And like you said, an employee is going to think twice about that steak that they're burning, or just something that costs the company a lot of money. They're more conscious of it. And so they have more ownership. They have more, they're more vested in the success of the company when they know what's going on. And so it is important that we are communicating because they want it. And for example, the survey is saying that they need it right now. Okay. Let's see, any other questions or comments? Okay, so remember that the Chamber and CIDC have their business survey, phase number 2, where we're trying to gather feedback from the businesses to see where you are now. And so be sure that you take that, and the date is April 27th is the deadline, but I recommend you go ahead and go in and do that as quickly as you can.
Okay, Andrea, on behalf of the Chamber and CIDC, thank you very much for all of this great information, for doing the survey and then sharing your results with this group. So we did share it yesterday with our Business Recovery Task Force, and now that we've recorded it, we'll plan to put it on so that more businesses and people, employers can have it to help them go back to work.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So if any of, I think most of you on here may know, already know this, but Andrea has elite performance, what's the last word?
Elite business performance.
Elite business performance. I just continue part of our team, so I don't even think of it. But she has her own business, and so we contract with her to do some things, but she is available to do one-on-one business, and I know she has done it for some of you already on the call, but I wanted to let everybody know that. So anyway, thank you so much, and thanks everybody for joining us today.
Yes, thank you. I want to give you time back in your day, and so I am going to end it.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Yes.